Okay, so in this new session, what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the UVs. For this, I'm going to go back to the cookie so we can clearly see what's going on over here. So what do we have? If you press spacebar 5, we see over here like all of our textures, how they're taking place over here. Now, something which is important, of course, is that we can use some kind of image reference on the background of what that's going to look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press D, and with pressing D you can use over here a disk file, and I have over here links to my planks texture. So the moment I'm going to apply this, display as background image, we can see what's going on. So what is this image like? Let's have a quick look over here. Like this. So this texture consists out of 4 elements, which is like top of the wood which has been cut through. We have like the stripped bark of the wood. So this is like the trunk but without the bark. And this is where the plank or the wood has been cut through. It's already a little bit older over here, as you can see through the cracks, and this part is like a broken or splitted element. So if you want to show, for example, some of those cracks with geometry, you can show this texture as an interior to that. So how are we going to apply that? Well, let's have a look over here at our UVs. Going to remove the numbering and perhaps also this so that we can only see the lines. Now there's something quite important to notice over here, and that is that the layout of these UVs is not really correct. So if we go to the top over here and we check what we have, then we can see that this layout is not working perfectly. So we have the centroid of everything, and this gives you some kind of result, but it doesn't like really match up. So what can we do? We can use like a UV project. Oh, sorry, not a UV project, but UV transform for that. And this is like a very powerful tool. What it allows you to do is it's just like another transform node, but on the UV level. So you can start rotating things, etc. Now I'm going to revert parameter interface. Oops, it's not working, the reversion over here. Revert to defaults. Revert to defaults. Okay, so now it's set right in the middle. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that everything is being moved right onto this spot. Now this is very easy, because what you can do is you could use again over here $x minus just a simple variable. So applying this variable should bring it completely back to the proper side. What am I seeing right now? I don't see any reaction at all. So if the sides and it's not moving, why isn't that moving? We have to do something else. Let's check what's going on. We see over here these UVs. Let's go and check what the minimum value is of the UV. So what can you do? You can do the following. You can make like an attribute promote. And with this attribute promote, we're going to take in from the vertices all the UV values, and we are going to promote those not to points, as you can see over here, but we're going to promote them to detail, which means the total geometry. Now what's the advantage of that? Is that right over here you see, because it's promoting to just the object as a whole, it's going to set over here one value that you can pick. So let's set over here the minimum value. And what we can see that the minimum value is for all set to 0, so that's indeed not working. Let's have a look. back over here what's going on. And here we can see this little point. So here's something going on. Okay, let's have a look when we're talking about over here. And that's the whole reason. See over here, this round circle has been used, and here we can see how this point has disappeared after that. Okay, so how can we check this? How can we do it differently then? Well, the thing that you can do is you can blast, for example, everything what we see right over here, which is not being the sides. So now that point has been deleted. If we do now an attribute promote, we see indeed the values that we need. So now we can go over here to our UV transform, and instead of using this, what you can do is you can just use getting the attributes. So not for a point this case, but we're using this for details. So detail referring to the node, which is the attribute promote1, referring to the attribute name, which is UV, and then which element. And so now we see it shifting, but of course we need to negate the whole thing. And so here we have it, everything is just nicely being centered. So this is really important, that you make sure that you have, like at all times, very clean UVs. This will make it easier later on to work with all the things you need. Okay, let's start by setting over here the top part. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a blast node, and this blast node is going to help us to make it everything much more visible. So not the sides, I'm sorry, we're going to show over here the top bottom, delete non-selected. So here we see the top bottom part. We need to get it right over here in the corner. So let's try over here our UV transform. Now of course we want to have variation, so ideally we want to make sure that it rotates around the whole center. So how can we do this? Let's see what's happening if we rotate around this. The rotation is occurring right over here, over the center point 0, 0, 0. So this is not exactly what we want, so we're going to set by default 0.5 and 0.5. So the moment now we start to rotate, we see it rotating right in the center, exactly what we need. Now to move it up right over here, we're going to create like a second UV transform, because we need also a different pivot point for that. So I'm going to copy that, I'm going to paste that. It's not that we need anything of this anymore, but we're going to set it over here on 0 and over here on 1. So the moment when we start to scale, we can bring it right where it belongs. So we're going to scale it by 0.25. So let's check that. The moment we start to rotate, it's nicely fitting in there. So this is great. This is our first part. The second part is we're gonna do right over here, and not the top bottom. By the way, just make sure that we add those groups over here so that they're only going to just those. We're gonna create over here a new version of sides, and like this. So now we've cut this away. Let's have a look at the total. These are spanning the complete part, and what we need to do is we need to make sure that these sides are going to fit in right between these over here, so it's only covering the stripped bark. So for that, again, we're going to create like a UV transform. And with this UV transform, you have to make sure again that it's going to scale down to the right proportions. Now what would that be? Well, for that I'm not going to really try to type in the value. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make like a simple calculation. So first of all, it needs to fit in a space which is everything except this width. This is something we need to remove. And then the resting width that we have is something we're going to divide by 2 because these are equal. So let's do that exactly as we see over here. So 1 minus 0.25, that was the first part. And then that result we're going to multiply with 0.5. And so let's do that over here as well. So like this. Okay, so that should be alright. What else should we do? We should move it to the side, and this is going to be easy because this is going to be 0.25. And so now it should be sitting right exactly where we need it. So we can vary with this size over here, and we can vary around right in here. Now the thing which is also quite important is that we know how much we can vary this whole thing. So how much can we move it up and down? And this is something also quite easy to calculate. So let's say, for example, over here that we have over here this size, and this is exactly the size we need to subtract from 1. So let's make that easy. 1 minus, and we take the channel of the scale x like this. So it's between that value, that's the maximum value, and the other is the minimum value. So let's check whether this is working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomize the timeline just to check, and we're going to multiply it with that channel value. Let's see what that's going to give us. This seems to be a little bit too much. It should be 1 minus that whole value. We need to have the opposite part, of course. And so if we move now, we see we have like random positioning, but still always within the whole session over here. Now what is the last thing that we can do? Well, again, it would be good if we can figure out how much we can move it from left to right. And this is something we can do by figuring out what the width or how much it is sitting to the side over here. So we're going to do something which is very similar to what we've done over here. So this blast is in the end something that we're going to keep on using. And in these sides we're calculating like the minimum value of movement. And we're going to take 2 of those. So this one is the attribute promote min, and we're going to take an attribute promote max. And so for this we're going to take the maximum value. So let's check over here, we have both of them, minimum and maximum value. So how can we play with this? We can do the following. We can first of all see how much can we move it to the side. So if the scaling is happening before. So let's do the scaling perhaps after another transform, UV transform, and let's set that over here. So let's see, we're going to use over here minus detail attribute promotes minus. Okay, I forgot again. UV, the parameter or the attribute, and then which element out of that. So now we see that over here it's nicely just fitting until this end. Well, I didn't make like a perfect division over here, as we can see, so I need to be a little bit more careful with that. And on the other hand, we want to make sure that we can randomly move it between a set of values. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're gonna do just the following way. We're gonna move it between, so it's being set over here, and now we can have random movements. So it is as being random plus random $f. And because what we want to make sure of is that it's going to move randomly between these parts, but just until this element we see right over here. So how can we do that? Well, the thing is, we have everything over here which was a full size, which we later on scaled down. So the only thing we need to calculate, or that we need to know, is that we have to multiply this by a half, so that its movement is limited to that part. And so if we're going to do that right now, we see everything is just fitting in between. So let's check. I'm going to disable this part for now. I'm copying it and removing it. And let's see what's going on over here. And it's not crossing the border. So that's nice. This is working as well. So let's put it back. And let's have like multiple times something like this. And so now it's moving randomly between those sessions. And so let's check for the proper name right now, sites, so that we're only adjusting those groups that we need. So let's see what's going on. We have this, we have like the movement over here random, we have like random deformation, all those kind of things are there. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is the following. Oh, I'm first going to show you one other detail, because right now, okay, we have the materials, and if we have a look over here, we see that the UVs probably are jumping around. That's fine, but we're gonna do it in such a way that we can use the background textures. So first again, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to remove the display value over here, and in the material we're going to change the default material. So I'm going over here to the shop network, the shaders operators network. We see our UV map over here, and we see over here the base color map. So this color map we're going to change over here by this texture. And again, I think I need to go right over here. So now we see the texture being applied. So we have the right texture for the top, and we're gonna have the right texture for the sides. Let me set it right over here to flat wireframe. See the sides and we see the top over here. So what I want you to do is the following: make sure that you have also the same part, but for the planks which are being cut away to the side. And what I want you to do then is the following. I want you to create like this procedural bridge. I'm going to show you the example what you can do, something from another student, and this is something and you can add some extra details if you want to. So this is an example of a student. It's from Twan, and he has created like this whole textured RopeBridge, which you can procedurally just draw with one line. He also added some extra animation to that. So these are the things that you should try to create. So that means the whole thing that we have over here, try to put it into like this fully procedural system. Make sure that you perhaps drill some holes in there. You could also make sure that you have like a system to have like some random cuts being cut out of the wood, as if the planks were like frozen, or as if the planks were being cracked out of dryness, out of heat. And you can do all kinds of variations in which you can create like very nice and good looking results. So in this assignment you will not only be judged on the procedure on itself, but you will also be judged this time on creating like a good looking end result as well. Okay, so this concludes the part in which we're going to create procedural rope bridges.